The town of Blackwood had a habit of waking slowly. It sat just far enough from the highway that traffic noise never reached it, but close enough that people still believed they were connected to the outside world. Rows of identical houses lined narrow streets, their lawns trimmed, their fences painted white or left bare to fade naturally. Nothing about Blackwood stood out. That was its charm. On the morning of October 17th, 1956, Blackwood woke the way it always did. Or at least it tried to. At exactly 6:42 a.m., Mrs. Eleanor Finch opened her front curtains as she had done every morning for the last 11 years. She stood with her coffee cooling in her hands and looked across the street toward the Harrison residence. She expected to see movement, a kitchen light, a shadow passing by the window, something. There was nothing. The Harrison house was dark. That alone would not have been strange. But Mrs. Finch noticed something else. The newspaper lay untouched at the bottom of the front steps. It had been delivered an hour earlier. The Harrisons never left it there. Not once in all the years she had lived across from them. She watched the house for a full minute. No movement, no sound. A small feeling of unease settled in her stomach. The kind that didn't come from logic but from instinct. She dismissed it, finished her coffee, turned away. By 7:15 a.m., the unease had spread. Mr. Thomas Harrison had not arrived at the train station to catch the 7:05 commuter train, a train he had taken every weekday for 9 years. The station clerk noticed his absence. So did the conductor. They mentioned it casually, without concern. By 8:30 a.m., concern began to form. Mrs. Harrison had not answered the phone. Neither had her husband. Their son, 12-year-old Daniel, was absent from school. The school secretary marked him as late, then absent, then made a note to call home. The call went unanswered. At 9:12 a.m., Mrs. Finch crossed the street. She knocked once, then again, then a third time, louder. No response. She tried the door handle. It was locked. At 9:18 a.m., she called the police. Officer Raymond Keller arrived at the Harrison house at 9:37 a.m. He was 34 years old, newly transferred from a larger city, and still adjusting to the pace of a town where serious crime was rare and violent, crime almost non-existent. He parked his cruiser carefully at the curb, stepped out, and surveyed the house. 2 stories, white siding, green shutters, a small porch with a rocking chair that no one seemed to use. Everything appeared ordinary, too ordinary. Mrs. Finch met him at the gate, wringing her hands. "I've lived here a long time," she said. "They've never been quiet like this." Officer Keller nodded and walked up the porch steps. He knocked firmly. "Police department," he called. No response. He circled the house, peering through windows. The curtains were drawn, but not tightly. Through the gaps, he could see furniture, lamps, framed photographs. Nothing out of place. No sign of struggle. At the back door, he tried the handle. Locked. He radioed for permission to enter. When the door was forced open at 10:06 a.m., the first thing Keller noticed was the smell. Not decay, not smoke, just stillness. A house that had not been disturbed for too long. Inside, everything was exactly where it should have been. Shoes neatly placed by the door. A coat hanging on the rack. The living room tidy, magazines stacked, cushions straight. In the kitchen, dishes sat clean and dry in the rack. The coffee pot was empty but washed. The house looked prepared, as if its occupants had finished their routines and simply stopped existing. They moved carefully, room by room. The master bedroom was empty. The bed was made. No sign anyone had slept there the previous night. The guest room untouched. The bathroom clean. Then they reached the door at the end of the hallway. Daniel's room. The door was closed. Officer Keller turned the knob. It did not move. Locked. From the inside, Keller paused. He pressed his ear against the wood. Nothing. He knocked once. Then twice. Still nothing. "Get me a locksmith," he said into his radio. The locksmith arrived 20 minutes later. He examined the door carefully. The lock was simple, old-fashioned, and fully intact. "No damage," he said. "No tampering. It's locked the way it's meant to be locked." "Can you open it?" Keller asked. The locksmith nodded. "But once I do, you won't be able to pretend this is normal anymore." At 10:41 a.m., the door was opened. The room beyond was small. A single bed against the wall, a desk, a bookshelf. a window looking out onto the backyard, and on the bed lay the body of Daniel Harrison. He was fully clothed. His hands rested neatly at his sides. His face was pale, his eyes closed as if asleep. There was no blood, no visible wound, no sign of a struggle. The window was locked, the glass intact. The door behind them remained the only point of entry, locked from the inside. By noon, the house was sealed off. By evening, the story had spread. By morning, the town of Blackwood was no longer the same. The medical examiner arrived shortly after noon. He was an older man, deliberate and careful. He examined the body without haste, taking notes, checking temperature, lifting eyelids, pressing fingers against skin. "Time of death?" Keller asked. "Between midnight and 2 a.m., the examiner replied. "Hard to be exact." "Cause?" The examiner hesitated. "There's no obvious trauma, no poison smell, no marks on the neck, no signs of suffocation. This will require a full autopsy." "What about the parents?" Keller asked. The examiner looked around the room. "They weren't here when he died." The parents were gone. Not dead, not found. Gone. The room itself offered few clues. No note, no weapon, no disturbed furniture. The bed was neat, the sheets unwrinkled. Too neat. Investigators photographed everything, measured distances, tested the lock, checked the hinges. Nothing suggested forced entry. Nothing suggested someone could have entered or exited after locking the door. And yet a 12-year-old boy lay dead inside. Outside, neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering. Some cried, some speculated, some watched silently, trying to memorize details they would later repeat. By nightfall, the Harrison house stood dark again, this time surrounded by police tape. Inside the locked room, the light remained on. Detective Harold Whitman arrived from the county office just after sunset. He was in his late 40s, tall, stooped slightly forward as if always leaning into a problem. His face bore the lines of someone who had seen too much and trusted little. He listened more than he spoke. He stood in Daniel's doorway for a long time without saying a word. Then he asked a single question. "Has anyone confirmed the parents left town?" "No," Keller said. "No car reported missing. No witnesses. No phone calls. No luggage disturbed." Whitman nodded. "Then they didn't leave," he said quietly. He walked into the room, circled the bed, and stopped near the window. "Locked doors don't make murders impossible," he said. "They make them interesting." He examined the lock again, this time slowly, almost respectfully. "People assume locked rooms mean magic," he continued. "They don't. They mean planning." He turned to Keller. "Start with the parents. Find out everything. Friends, work, money, secrets. Then we come back here." "What about the room?" Keller asked. Whitman glanced around once more. "This room is lying," he said. "We just don't know how yet." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the trees. Inside, the locked room waited. The case had begun. Detective Harold Whitman did not believe in coincidences. By the time the sun rose over Blackwood the morning after the discovery, Whitman had already reviewed every photograph taken inside the Harrison house. He studied them in silence at the small desk set up in the temporary command room, a spare office inside the local police station. Each image was nearly identical to the next. Clean rooms, straight lines, no chaos. A crime scene without chaos always bothered him more than one soaked in blood. "People don't vanish cleanly," he said at last. Officer Keller stood across from him, holding a thin file. "Neighbors say the Harrisons were normal, quiet, kept to themselves. No arguments, no visitors late at night." Whitman looked up. "Normal is a performance," he said. "Especially in towns like this." He closed the folder of photographs and stood. "Let's talk to people who knew them when they weren't being watched." Thomas Harrison worked as a senior, accountant for a manufacturing firm 40 minutes outside Blackwood. His co-workers described him as reliable, reserved, and predictable. He arrived on time, left on time, ate lunch alone, rarely spoke about his personal life. He never missed work, his supervisor said, except for sick days, and even then, he'd call ahead. Whitman flipped through attendance records. "Any financial trouble?" The supervisor shook his head. If anything, he was careful. Too careful. He questioned expenses others ignored. Careful. At home, Margaret Harrison had been equally quiet. She volunteered at the local library twice a week. attended church regularly, and avoided gossip. No close friends, no enemies. They kept to themselves, the librarian said. But they were polite. Daniel Harrison's teachers painted a similar picture. Intelligent, introverted, well-behaved. No disciplinary issues, no signs of abuse, no signs of distress. Did he seem afraid of anyone? Whitman asked one teacher. The woman hesitated. He was watchful, she said. But children can be like that. Watchful. By the end of the day, Whitman had learned a great deal about who the Harrisons appeared to be. He had learned almost nothing about who they actually were. The Harrison car remained parked in the driveway. The fuel tank was nearly full. Margaret's purse sat untouched in the bedroom closet. Thomas's wallet lay inside the top drawer of his dresser. Cash was still inside. They had not planned to leave. They had not prepared to run, and yet they were gone. Detective Whitman returned to the house that evening. He preferred crime scenes after dark. Details stood out differently when the world was quiet. He stood once again inside Daniel's room, alone this time. The door was open now, the lock dismantled and bagged for evidence. He examined the walls, the desk, the bookshelf. Nothing screamed violence. That disturbed him. Children rarely die peacefully when someone else is involved. He crouched near the bed and noticed something subtle. The mattress was indented slightly on one side, as if someone heavier than Daniel had sat there recently. The indentation had faded, but not completely. Whitman straightened slowly. Someone had been in this room after the door was locked. He turned toward the window. It remained locked. The latch showed no sign of tampering. Outside, the ground beneath the window was undisturbed. No footprints, no ladder marks, no explanation. The autopsy report arrived 2 days later. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Whitman read the line twice. A healthy 12-year-old doesn't just suffer cardiac arrest. Keller said quietly. No, Whitman replied. Not without help. Toxicology showed trace amounts of a sedative in Daniel's bloodstream. Not enough to kill him directly, but enough to weaken his system. Enough to slow his breathing. Enough to make him compliant. Enough to make his heart vulnerable. The sedative was not a common household drug. It required a prescription. Whitman closed the report and leaned back in his chair. Someone planned this, he said, and they planned it carefully. The question was no longer how Daniel died. The question was why his parents vanished afterward. On the third night, the phone rang at the station. An anonymous caller. I saw something, the voice said, male, nervous. The night it happened. Whitman took the call himself. What did you see? A car, the voice said. Parked near the Harrison house, late, around midnight. Describe it. Dark, maybe black. Older model. I didn't recognize it. Why didn't you report this earlier? Silence. I didn't want trouble, the voice finally said. But now, that boy is dead. The line went dead. Whitman stared at the receiver for a long moment. Someone had been near the house. Someone unknown. By the end of the week, pressure mounted. Newspapers ran headlines questioning police competence. Rumors spread. Some claimed the parents had killed their son and fled. Others whispered about strangers, cults, or secret experiments. Whitman ignored the noise. He returned to one detail again and again. The lock. The locksmith's report confirmed it. The door had been locked from the inside using a simple turn mechanism. No trick, no string. No hidden device. People lie, Whitman muttered. Objects don't. Unless they are misunderstood. He visited the evidence room late that night and examined the lock himself. Slowly, carefully. That was when he noticed something no one else had. A faint smear of oil on the inside edge of the mechanism. Fresh. Not factory residue. Someone had lubricated the lock recently. Whitman felt a chill move through him. Lubricated locks turn silently. Lubricated locks turn easily. Lubricated locks allow precision. If the door was locked deliberately, then the killer wanted the illusion of impossibility. If the parents vanished willingly, then fear drove them. And if they did not vanish willingly, Whitman closed his eyes briefly. Then someone else had locked the door and walked away. The Harrison house sat empty under police seal. But Detective Whitman knew something important now. This was not a crime of opportunity. It was a performance, and the next act was coming. Detective Harold Whitman began Part 3 with a decision he rarely made. He reconstructed the night. Not from reports, not from witness statements, from silence. At 11:47 p.m. on October 16th, the Harrison house went dark. Neighbors confirmed the lights shut off within minutes of each other. Not room by room, but all at once. That detail mattered. It suggested intention, not routine. Whitman stood across the street that night. Exactly 1 week later, staring at the house as it had stood then. Same angle, same distance, same darkness. "People don't go to sleep all at once," he said quietly to Keller. "They prepare." They walked the timeline backward. At 11:12 p.m., a neighbor reported hearing a car idle briefly near the Harrison driveway. No door slam, no voices. Just the engine. At 10:55 p.m., a local pharmacy log showed a prescription pickup under Margaret Harrison's name. The drug matched the sedative found in Daniel's blood. The pharmacist had not questioned it. The prescription was valid. Issued 2 weeks earlier by a doctor who had since moved out of state. Whitman closed the file slowly. "So Margaret picked it up herself," Keller said. "Or someone picked it up as her," Whitman replied. "No ID required back then." They returned to the Harrison house with fresh eyes. The kitchen trash had already been searched. Nothing unusual, but Whitman didn't focus on what was thrown away. He focused on what was missing. No empty pill bottles, no syringes, no measuring cups. Someone had cleaned thoroughly. Too thoroughly. Upstairs, Whitman stood in the hallway again. The space between the parents' bedroom and Daniel's room felt narrower now, closer. He stepped into the master bedroom, opened the closet again. Margaret's dresses hung neatly, Thomas's suits pressed and aligned, shoes polished. But something was wrong. He knelt. Under the bed, faint scratch marks ran parallel to the floorboards. Fresh, not from cleaning, from movement. Something heavy had been dragged. Whitman followed the marks to the wall. They stopped abruptly. "There was something here," he said. "Something removed." "What?" Keller asked. Whitman didn't answer. "Not yet." The pressure on the department intensified. State investigators requested access. Reporters waited outside the station daily. The town began to divide. Some believed the parents were monsters. Others believed they were victims. Whitman believed neither explanation was complete. He pulled phone records next. Outgoing calls from the Harrison house showed nothing unusual. No calls made after 9:34 p.m. that night. Incoming calls told a different story. At 12:18 a.m., the house received a call that lasted exactly 40 seconds from a payphone. 3 blocks away, Whitman visited the location the next morning. The payphone stood outside a closed diner, its metal surface scratched and dented. No cameras, no witnesses, but the timing mattered. Daniel's estimated time of death fell shortly after that call. Someone had checked in, or confirmed something. The lock returned to Whitman's thoughts. He recreated it on his desk using a similar model: turn, click, silent. He tested angles, pressure, timing. Then he noticed the flaw. The lock could be turned from the outside if the internal mechanism had been loosened just enough. Not broken, adjusted. It required knowledge, patience, and time inside the room. Whitman felt the weight of realization settle slowly. The locked room had been staged long before the night of the murder. They brought in the housekeeper. Mrs. Lillian Moore had cleaned the Harrison home twice a week for nearly a year. She was nervous but cooperative. "Did you ever enter Daniel's room?" Whitman asked. She nodded. "Sometimes, to dust. Did you notice anything unusual recently?" She hesitated. "There was a man," she said quietly. "Once upstairs." Whitman looked up sharply. "When?" "A few weeks before. Everything. He said he was a family friend." "Describe him." "Tall, older, polite. He knew where things were." "Did the Harrisons seem comfortable with him?" Mrs. Moore swallowed. "No." That single word shifted the case. Whitman asked one more question. "Did you ever see him enter Daniel's room?" "Yes," she said. "He closed the door." The department ran descriptions, cross-referenced visitors, dug into past associations. A name surfaced. Dr. Alan Brewer, former physician. License revoked 5 years earlier. Specialized in cardiac research, experimental treatments, ethical violations. Whitman stared at the photograph on his desk. Tall, older, polite. The sedative, the cardiac arrest, the locked room. It aligned too cleanly. But Brewer had vanished years ago. No address, no phone, no trail. Or so it seemed. That night, Whitman returned to the house alone. He stood in Daniel's room, lights off, door closed. He recreated the scene. A child sedated, a trusted adult present, a calm environment, no struggle. Then the door closed. The lock turned. Softly, deliberately, Whitman opened his eyes. The locked room was never meant to trap the killer. It was meant to trap the truth. At 2:14 a.m., the station phone rang again. Same anonymous voice. "You're looking in the wrong place," the voice said. Whitman's grip tightened. "Then tell me where to look." Silence. Then one sentence. "They didn't run. They were taken." The line went dead. Whitman stared at the receiver. Part 3 ended with certainty replacing doubt. The parents were not suspects. They were leverage. And the case was no longer about a locked door. It was about control. Detective Harold Whitman stopped sleeping after the second anonymous call. Not because of fear, but because the case had shifted. The locked room was no longer the center of the mystery. It was a tool. And tools belonged to someone who understood leverage. Whitman reviewed everything again, this time with a different question in mind. Who needed Daniel Harrison to die quietly? Not violently, not publicly, quietly. The answer lay in what the boy's death created. Silence, obedience, control. Dr. Alan Brewer's name appeared again and again as Whitman dug deeper. Old medical journals, archived complaints, testimonies buried under years of bureaucracy. Brewer had been brilliant once, too brilliant for his own limits. He believed the human heart could be trained to fail on. Command, stress, sedatives, timing. He believed death could be induced without leaving fingerprints. The medical board called it dangerous theory. Brewer called it progress. His license had been revoked after a patient died during a private trial. No charges were filed. No prison, just disappearance. Until now. Whitman visited the family of that first patient. A quiet woman answered the door. "He said it was safe," she whispered. "He said my husband would help people." Whitman nodded. He had heard variations of that sentence many times in his career. Brewer never worked with strangers. He worked with trust. The Harrison parents had been selected carefully. Thomas Harrison's accounting firm once audited a medical research fund connected to Brewer's early work. The audit had flagged irregularities. Funds missing, results exaggerated. Thomas Harrison had signed the report. The report had never gone public. Whitman closed the file slowly. Brewer hadn't forgotten. On the fourth night after the discovery, a breakthrough came quietly. A patrol officer reported a suspicious property 20 miles outside Blackwood, an abandoned farmhouse, no utilities, recent tire tracks. Whitman arrived just before dawn. Inside, the house smelled of dust and chemicals. In the back room, they found medical equipment. Old, modified, familiar, and a tape recorder. Whitman pressed play. Brewer's voice filled the room, calm, measured. "This is not murder," the voice said. "This is demonstration." Whitman felt his jaw tighten. The recording continued. "The parents comply because they understand loss. The child was the proof. The room was the lesson." Whitman stopped the tape. The farmhouse wasn't a hideout. It was a classroom. Evidence suggested Thomas and Margaret Harrison had been taken alive. Sedated, moved, no signs of struggle, no blood. Brewer didn't kill parents. He used them. Their disappearance was insurance. Whitman understood now why the house had been cleaned so thoroughly. Brewer wanted investigators focused on the impossible door, not the missing people. While everyone argued about locks, Brewer moved freely. Whitman returned to Daniel's room one final time before the house was released. He stood where the bed had been. The room felt smaller now. He imagined Brewer sitting beside the child, explaining, reassuring, turning death into instruction. Daniel never knew he was part of an experiment. Whitman closed his eyes. "This wasn't a crime of anger," he said quietly. "It was a crime of belief." That evening, the anonymous caller contacted the station again. But this time, the voice was different, weaker. "You were right," the caller said. "They didn't run." Whitman leaned forward. "Where are they?" A pause. "Not far," the voice said. "But not alive anymore." The line went dead. Whitman knew then. Brewer never kept leverage longer than necessary. A warrant was issued nationwide. Brewer became a manhunt priority. But Whitman knew something others didn't. Brewer wouldn't flee. Men like him never did. They stayed close enough to watch understanding arrive. Part 4 ended with the case fully exposed. The locked room was solved. The motive was revealed, but the killer was still free. And he was waiting. Detective Harold Whitman knew the case was ending before anyone else did. Not because the killer had been caught, but because the questions had stopped changing. In Whitman's experience, that was how real cases ended. Not with certainty, but with acceptance, the kind that settles slowly, like dust after a collapse. Dr. Alan Brewer did not run. 3 days after the anonymous call that confirmed the parents' deaths, Brewer was found sitting in the back pew of a closed church 15 miles from Blackwood. He did not resist arrest. He did not deny his name. He did not ask for a lawyer. He only asked one question. Did they understand? Whitman did not answer. Brewer's confession was clinical. He spoke in timelines and outcomes, not emotions. Daniel Harrison, he explained, was not chosen randomly. The boy's medical records showed a mild, congenital heart sensitivity. Manageable, treatable, invisible. Perfect. The sedative weakened the system. The calm environment reduced panic. The timing ensured cardiac failure without physical trauma. No marks, Brewer said. That was the point. The locked room had never been about escape. It was about authority. A locked door tells people to stop thinking, Brewer said. They see mystery instead of method. Whitman wrote everything down. Brewer admitted to staging the lock weeks in advance, adjusting the mechanism, lubricating the turn, ensuring silence. He had trained the room to obey him. The parents' fate was revealed next. Thomas and Margaret Harrison were taken to the farmhouse. Brewer recorded their reactions, their grief, their compliance. They understood, Brewer said. Eventually, they were killed 2 days later. No locked room, no performance, just efficiency. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Brewer was found guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment without parole, no appeals. The judge called the crime a deliberate act of intellectual violence. The newspapers called it the impossible room. Whitman never did. Months later, the Harrison house was sold. The new owners repainted the walls, replaced the locks, removed the tape outlines. Daniel's room became a guest room. Life resumed, but something remained. Whitman returned to Blackwood one final time before retiring. He stood in the empty hallway where the locked door once stood. The new lock clicked softly when turned, smooth, efficient. He left it unlocked. Because the truth, he had learned, did not live behind doors. It lived in people who believed they were smarter than consequence, and rooms, no matter how carefully staged, always remembered.